In 1970, the city of Vancouver, British Columbia finally got an NHL expansion team. They named themselves the Vancouver Canucks, Canuck being a slang term for Canadians derived from an Uncle Sam-like character named Johnny Canuck. They've made the Stanley Cup Finals 3 times, but lost all 3, including twice in Game 7s that were followed by city-wide riots. So what's it like being a fan of a team that's never won a Stanley Cup in its half-century of existence? Let's find out. I'm Dan Hopper, and this is Thrill of Defeat. Our guests today are Stefan Heck. He streams with the Go Off Kings and also has the podcast Block Party and a Vancouver Canucks podcast titled I Hate This Team. Stefan, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to talk about the team that I hate.
Great. That is literally what this podcast is about. So perfect guest for being here. And with us is Stefan's podcast partner from I Hate This Team. And he also has a podcast, WFYM Talk Radio. It's Aaron Bertovo. Aaron, thanks so much for being here.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So this is our first hockey episode. Hockey, personally my favorite sport, but can't find a lot of comedians and writers who love hockey. So I'm glad we finally got 2 people who are absolutely miserable about the Vancouver Canucks to be here.
Yeah, of course. You're a Penguins fan, to be clear, right? So you don't know a lot about hockey misery?
No, not really. No,
Okay.
They were bad for a couple years in the 80s and a couple years in the 2000s. But
The
other than that,
couple years of darkness.
So just to get us started, where did you guys grow up, and how did you become Vancouver Canucks fans? What are some of your early Canucks memories?
You were born into it, right?
Yeah, unfortunately. My dad got me into it. He grew up as a Leafs fan in Ontario and actually went to a playoff game during the 1967 run, when the last time they won the cup.
Mm-hmm.
Good God. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And then he moved to Vancouver in, I think, the late 60s. And then I became a Canucks fan when they showed up in the 70s in 1970. I mean, I feel bad about being a Canucks fan, and I have a lot of misery. And with him, it's just like, I mean, he just turned 70 this year, and I think he's just given up all hope. But he did get me into watching the Canucks. I really wish I could go back in time and just tell my younger self, like, you can just be a fan of any team. It doesn't have to be the team that your dad cheers for. But
yeah, well,
here we are.
Once you're locked in, you can't. I mean,
no,
if you rooted for someone else now, it would be.
I mean, I'm sure we'll get to this later, but I briefly did try to become a Seattle Kraken fan, and I just couldn't do it because I've just been a Canucks fan for too long. So yeah, I mean, we'll get to that later once we're deep in the misery. So.
Yeah. No, I feel the same way. Like, even personally, just going to college, I couldn't get into college sports as much. It's not the same as like rooting for a team that I rooted for since I was like 3, 4, 5 years old, and that my parents root for. It's a different thing. So even if you choose to adopt the new fandom later, it's never the same.
It's not quite the same, no.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm also a Seahawks fan, and I've been a Seahawks fan since like the early mid 2000s. So like when they won a Super Bowl, it was like awesome. Mm-hmm. But like the Canucks winning a Stanley Cup would be like a million times better for me.
Aaron, how about you?
Yeah, so I was also born in Vancouver to English parents. So like they weren't as into hockey, but like they moved to Vancouver when they were teenagers, and like, oh, this is like a cool Canadian thing to do. And so I don't remember 94 because I was knee high on a grasshopper, though I was like in Vancouver as it was happening. And like a couple years later, when I was like 6 years old, which is when I really like started getting into it, I do remember my parents saying, oh yeah, it was so great. And there was flags everywhere and the whole city was into it. And it was an awesome experience. And so I thought more of that was just around the corner.
Oh yeah.
And then, I think I turned into a real Canucks sicko when I was like 12. It was after Canada won the Salt Lake City Olympics.
Yeah, 2002.
2002.
That's around the same age that I got really hardcore into it. And in fact, we have known each other since like 2003, since 2002, because we were both posting on a Canucks forum together.
As like 12 and 13-year-olds, which is really funny to think about now. Like, I would hate to go into online spaces to talk about sports, and there's someone in like fucking 6th grade that's telling me that I'm like wrong.
Thinks they know what they're talking about.
Yeah, we should trade the Sedins for Ryan Smith. We gotta get more Canadians in here. Why is everyone mad at me?
2003 like message board.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
awesome.
Oh yeah,
Really.
the peak of message boards. Yeah,
With like do you have like a Dave Matthews Band like avatar or something? Like what was the vibes of the 2003 Canucks message board?
it was pretty.
Man.
I feel like it was fairly positive around then because the Canucks were kind of just starting to get good again. And so it wasn't. It's funny looking back because that's like over 20 years ago now. But like we weren't nearly as miserable back then because the team had only been around for like 33 years at that point. Yeah, and now it's 55 years. And I mean, we will obviously get to this, but I've just given up basically all hope of them ever winning. So
I remember a thing on the message boards back then because the Canucks made the finals in '82 and then in '94, and so there were so many people that said like, "Oh, it happens every 12 years, so we get to the finals. 2006 is going to be our year," and it was like kind of looking like it was building up that way almost because you had we called them the West Coast Express, Todd Bertuzzi, Brennan Morris, and Marcus Naslund. They were like the most exciting line in hockey.
Yeah, former Pittsburgh Penguin Marcus Naslund.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. The vibe of that forum was interesting. There's stuff that I just like. I think of it as Canucks.com message board type people because there's a bunch of like early 20-something, late teen Vancouverites. And so I feel like everybody loved Interpol, the band.
Yeah, perfect.
Pearl Jam
I was way into them.
Yeah. I think reading the like because there's also like Christianity, atheism arguments there. And like reading through those debates back and forth is like what made me start to think like actually consider faith and like, do I actually believe this stuff? Which like I haven't really thought of that, but it's definitely from like seeing these people go back and forth on that forum that's like
Canucks killed your faith in God. I got it.
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah.
I love the idea that the Canucks are like some like cicadas that emerge every 12 years to like lose in heartbreaking fashion in the Stanley Cup finals.
It really did feel that way. Yeah. And in 2011 there was a thing where I think every Canadian city that had hosted the Olympics, their NHL team won the Stanley Cup the following year or like within a couple years. So Calgary was one of them. Montreal was one. And then Vancouver, I mean, 2010 Olympics, Canada wins the gold. And then 2011, they're like the best team in the league. And we thought it was going to happen. And
oh, man. So just to give our listeners who might not be as familiar with either NHL or the Canucks specifically some context, can you kind of inform us about like what are the rivalries in Canada? You know, like I know Toronto and Montreal have their thing, and Ottawa hates Toronto, and Calgary hates Edmonton, and vice versa. But where does Vancouver and Western Canada fit into all of this Canadian hatred that us Americans don't usually know that much about?
Everybody hates us.
I think everyone does hate. Everyone does hate Vancouver. I think our fans are completely psychotic.
Okay.
I mean, I think Montreal fans and Toronto fans are probably crazier in total just because there are more of them. But I think if you look at like insanity per capita, Canucks fans are probably number one. And it's because we've just nothing good has ever happened to the Vancouver Canucks. I mean, the thing I always say when people have arguments about like which team is the most hard done by, I think there's really an argument to be made for like two teams, and it's Vancouver and Buffalo. And I mean, obviously Buffalo hasn't made the playoffs 14 years in a row, which is insane. Mm-hmm. But Vancouver has been around since 1970. They have, I believe, the most losses in the NHL since then. Not only have they never won a Stanley Cup, not only are they the only team to lose 2 Stanley Cup final Game 7s without ever winning a cup, they have somehow never picked first overall in 55 years. They've never won a draft lottery. They've never picked first overall. Buffalo's picked first overall, I think, 4 times, possibly just 3. So I think people need to understand the baseline of misery and the reason why our fans are so crazy. And also when the team is like rarely actually good, our fans get even crazier because it happens so infrequently. Mm-hmm. So I would say most Canadian teams hate us, but it is kind of like a little brother thing too, in a way, because we're on the West Coast. You know, everyone always brags about Vancouver as a city versus like Edmonton or whatever. I always say this, and I think Aaron agrees with me, is that, I mean, all these fan bases hate us, and it's always very funny seeing people talk shit about the Canucks and Canucks fans online because nobody hates them more than we do, right?
Yeah.
So it's really like cute seeing someone try and take a run at like making fun of the Canucks, and it's like, okay, like nothing you can say can hurt us.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Canucks fans are the most likely, and I mean, I saw this happen when Edmonton lost in the Cup Finals, not this time, but the time before. It was Canucks fans that were calling into Edmonton radio with like ridiculous calls to troll them, like as they lost a Game 7 in the Cup Finals, which I think is a very like uniquely Canucks fan thing to do.
Like what kind of calls do you mean?
I don't remember any like.
Well, they were.
But...
I remember one specifically, which was that they needed to. Edmonton needed to fire their management group and hire Jim Benning to get the team back on track. So it was just like stuff like that. And
Jim Benning, former. I don't want to say disgraced, but widely hated. Disgraced general manager of.
I think disgraced just in terms of like how bad he was as a GM. Like literally, he legitimately like ruined hockey for me. I think. Obviously, we're a little biased here. I think he's the worst GM of all time. But I think there's arguments to be made for like Mike Milbury, other GMs. Obviously, I think he's solidly bottom 5 of all time, and I think the reasoning for that is that he's like a member of like what would be known as like the old boys club. He played in the NHL
for sure.
He was a scout. He was like an assistant GM, and then he was a GM in Vancouver. And since he got fired, he has not popped up anywhere. Like even as just like a regional scout for like an NHL team, he's just like out of hockey. And that's like unheard of for guys like that. So he really did such a bad job that nobody wants to hire him for anything, which is crazy.
Yeah, you're right. The NHL recycles people even
like more than any other league, I think.
The Blackhawks management team that oversaw their sexual assault like allegations have now gotten jobs. It's like the league will like always look out for its own, and it's just funny. They're like, ooh man, that guy sucks. We got to rehire Ron Hextall.
Yeah.
So if Edmonton, when Edmonton was going for the Cup the past 2 years, or like if Toronto were ever in a position to win the Cup, would any part of you be rooting for a fellow Canadian team, or would you be like extra?
Fuck no.
I don't care.
No, I mean Edmonton's the great Satan.
Yeah, Edmonton definitely not. Edmonton, in terms of fan bases that are like spoiled. Obviously, you're a Pittsburgh fan, so you've seen a lot of good times. Edmonton, they won 5 Stanley Cups in the 80s and 1990, 4 with Wayne Gretzky. Like, obviously most people would consider him the best player of all time. And then they have what they refer to as the decade of darkness. And let me ask you this, because this is a question that I would love to pose to every fan base. Would you trade 10 years out of the playoffs for a chance to pick Connor McDavid and just have him on your team forever? Like, I think maybe Pittsburgh wouldn't because you're so used to winning and stuff. But I'll tell you, as a Canucks fan,
one bad year and have it.
Yeah, I would take 10 years out of the playoffs for Connor McDavid, no question. And that's not including the fact that they had 3 other first overall picks in the decade of darkness. So I think the thing we hate about Edmonton fans, I wouldn't mind it if they just bragged about how many cups they had, having Wayne Gretzky, having McDavid. Like, I can understand that. Like, yeah, go ahead and brag about that. But they also want to be like hard done by, and they've had it so difficult. And it's like, no, you have not at all. You have it so easy. Toronto's a little different for me because I do have a lot of Leafs fans friends. So like, I probably wouldn't be cheering for them, but on some level I would be like, okay, you know what? I can hedge a little bit here and say that I'm happy for all my Leafs fans friends. So
it would be really annoying afterwards, because that's where like all hockey media is based out of. Like Toronto winning a cup would be like the Cowboys winning a Super Bowl, or like England national soccer winning a World Cup.
Yeah, you would never hear the end.
Similarly, you wouldn't hear the end of it, but like they are historical losers with a ton of fans. And like a prime directive of our podcast is cheering for every team that has never won a cup before to win the cup before the Canucks, because we genuinely don't think Vancouver will ever win. So we can at least like claim being the most hard done to.
Yeah.
And so
we want to be the only fan base that's allowed to complain about anything.
That's why you both are wearing Utah Mammoth jerseys right now as we're recording.
Right. They're a fun team. But like with Toronto, there's a bit of an asterisk, because you'll bring that up and they'll say, well, that was in 1967. Like that was before you guys were in the league. Like Toronto's never won a cup with more than 6 teams in the league, or with like a real playoff format, et cetera, et cetera. So like I can kind of see where that argument comes from, especially from people that are around our age that have like no memories at all of 1967 happening.
But if you're a Canucks fan, like making fun of a Leafs fan, they will still say like, "Oh, well, we have like however many cups," even though it was all like original 6 era. So
yeah, back when there's like 7 good hockey players in the world.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I think in terms of rivalries right now, Edmonton is the biggest one because we had that recent playoff series against them. Historically, Calgary is probably a bigger rival because we've had more.
We're kind of more on their level,
matchups.
I think. Like they've only won 1 cup. They're kind of outside of that 1 cup. They're pretty pathetic. Outside of that 1 cup win, which look, I would trade everything for just one. I've said this before. I would take 20 years out of the playoffs for the Canucks to have won a cup before I was born, just so they at least had one.
You get the merch, like you can watch the DVD, like So I live in Calgary now and have for like the last 15 years. So I've gone to more Flames games than I've gone to Canucks games. And if Calgary was to go on a run, which let's be clear, they won't. There's no risk of that happening for a long time. I would be cheering for them because it's like my city and like they haven't done anything to me personally in a long time. So
they hate Edmonton as much as we do. I think that's part of it. Is we've kind of bonded with Calgary fans over I think Aaron's cat just knocked over the camera. We've bonded with Calgary fans over our hatred of Oilers fans. And
I was at a game this year, like Vancouver Calgary game in Calgary, and on the way out of the arena, fans of both teams were chanting "Edmonton sucks." Like they weren't involved at all.
I
and
get
so
it.
like
I totally
there's
get that.
maybe like a living rent free component that,
certainly
that the Oilers have, which like if I was an Oilers fan, I would be like making fun of us for that. But I do kind of like the anti-Edmonton solidarity. I wouldn't care if Montreal won because they already have so many cups and like they're a fun team to watch now.
They were also the only fan base maybe outside of Winnipeg to cheer for the Canucks in
Winnipeg
2011.
didn't exist in 2011.
Oh, I guess that's true. Yeah, that's a good point.
The Thrashers were fine,
but Montreal was cheering for Vancouver in 2011 for the most part, so that helps in our books. I mean, Winnipeg I don't hate necessarily, and again, they've never won. I'd like them to win before the Canucks. Edmonton, I don't want at all. Ottawa could really care less.
They'd be very annoying too, I think. But it would be funny from like pissing off Toronto Maple Leafs fans.
Ottawa winning before Toronto would be so fun. So
definitely
there is that. Yeah.
It just I just feel like Americans don't. I don't know if we just think of Canada as this like big friendly place where everyone gets along and it's like, oh, the Leafs are going to win this one for Canada or something. I mean, of course the Leafs are not going to win for anyone, but in the parallel universe where the Leafs get past the second round, would everyone be cheering for them? And I'm just like, I feel like a lot of the country would be like, fuck that.
No. Well, they push for it up here, like in the media and in like commercials and stuff. Like you'll see like commercials where they're like, "Hey, let's bring the cup home to Canada," and it's just like
this is
I don't know
our game.
And there are fans, like there are Canucks fans who were cheering for Edmonton this year, and
they're casuals though. That's like a casual position to have.
Yes,
and what I always like to say about that is like you look at soccer, for example, if Man United is in the Champions League, you're not having Man City fans cheer for them. So we could bring it back to England or to Manchester. Like, no, it's club sports, and to cheer nationally in a club sport is bizarre to me. It's all about like allegiances and like rivalries and other teams that you hate.
Just so you know, with the center ice package, I've seen the Canadian commercial, so I'm
nice. You're familiar with Boston Pizza.
You think Americans don't know about your secret weird nationalism?
You're hopping on Tony Bett to.
Subway makes their bread with Canadian potatoes or whatever that ad was. I was like, what the hell is this? That was a real ad.
Oh, do you get that fucking the border wall ad?
I don't know, probably.
So this was like a sports gambling ad, and I think they made it
transition. Sorry.
Yeah, I know that they made it like before like the elbows up 51st state stuff really started popping off.
Yeah.
But it's like a comedian doing like on the street segments, and his whole bit is that they're building a border wall. So like board as in hockey boards. And then he gets fans of other teams to like talk smack to each other on either side of the board. And we got a full year of this guy smugly saying,
"Oh my God,
oh yeah, we're going to build a border wall. And then like really bad pre-rehearsed comedians doing like banter where it's like one-liners that aren't funny.
It was also like before that, their tagline was Americans don't know shit about hockey, I think, and basically implying like you should bet with us because we're a Canadian company that knows about hockey. But if you were betting on hockey, you'd want to bet with the company that doesn't know anything about hockey because they're going to give you insane odds on stuff, probably.
Yeah, you're going to be more favorable to go to
rational...
like a sports book in Vegas. Sorry,
it's like such a like well thought out refutation to the.
Baby.
See the
commercial play. Some logical inconsistencies in your tagline here.
It's real. I mean, it's crazy because like we stream on like all our games stream on Sportsnet Plus, which is like the only way to outside of like cable TV, like the only way to like watch hockey up here, and it's like just the worst app in the world. It doesn't work half the time. The Apple TV version of the app 2 years ago, if you wanted to start watching a game, you would have to legitimately reset your Apple TV like 10 times before it would work. God. And they just never fixed it because they know they're the only game in town. But because it's a streaming app, the commercial breaks are just literally, it's the same. I mean, you've seen it, but it's the same 3 commercials over and over again. And it's just... It just drives you insane.
There's something with streaming or with the NHL playoffs in general. When you see a commercial that's like mildly annoying and you're like, whatever. It's like, get ready to see this 5 million times until it's like until the first syllable of the commercial makes your skin crawl and you can't sleep that night. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in terms of like passion too, I mean, I don't know exactly if there's an analogy to a US city, but like how is hockey to Vancouver and Canucks fans, is it, college football to people in Alabama? Is it as big as like, the Cowboys in Dallas? How universal is it to people in your city?
It's like the only game in town, but the main thing, like Vancouver versus like the rest of Canada, is that just like playing hockey is not that big here. Because it doesn't snow very much, so there's no like outdoor rinks or anything during the winter, and you can play like soccer all year round. So like soccer is really big out here, baseball is really big out here because you can play baseball pretty early. Like growing up, I played soccer all year round, and in the winter when it was like pouring rain, we wouldn't play on grass fields, we'd play on gravel fields. So soccer was way bigger out here and probably still is. I think basketball is pretty big, but there's just not that many rinks, and I think that kind of lessens the hockey culture a little bit. When the Canucks are good, I mean, I think it is to an extent a bandwagon city, but like the hardcore fan base is like really, really into it. And there are a lot of them, but it does always kind of tick me off to hear Oilers fans be like, oh, Vancouver's just a bandwagon city. They have no fans. And this is like a true belief of mine, is that if you took the Vancouver Canucks franchise history and the Edmonton Oilers franchise history and you switched them, Edmonton would have left town for like Houston in the 90s. Like they almost moved in the mid 90s after winning 5 Stanley Cups. So Oilers fans to be like, yeah, we're the best fans in the world. It's like, yeah, of course you have Wayne Gretzky, Connor McDavid, 5 Stanley Cups. It's so easy to be a fan of something like that. The fact that the Canucks are still in Vancouver is a miracle.
Yeah. That's interesting. I didn't know that about the hockey culture because it's not as wintry as some of the rest of
Well, the thing sense with that too is like Stefan and I was too poor to play hockey. But we grew up in a time where the Canucks weren't particularly good. And so I don't think there's as much interest, but you look at the league now and like, okay, not this last draft, but Macklin Celebrini grew up as a Canucks fan in Vancouver, came through that system. Connor Bedard came through that system as well. They would have been growing up while the Canucks were really good. Yeah. And so you see like a lot of elite talent pushed out of Vancouver, especially recently, but yeah, not as big of a thing as if you're in like small town Alberta where it's like the only thing to do and everybody does it.
Yeah. I mean, in the doc here, it says, are they sort of analogous to a particular team or city? And I think before they won the World Series, my best comparison for them would have been like the Texas Rangers, where like they were like pretty bad for most of their history, but they would go on these runs. I mean, I think they went to 2 World Series in a row and lost both of them. So it sort of felt a little bit like that. I think the team I would compare them to now is maybe like the Atlanta Falcons or the Minnesota Vikings. Falcons, I think, are a good comparison because they've had runs where they're just like maybe the best team in the league or like second best team in the league, have super elite talent, but they like blow up in like the craziest ways. I mean, the Vikings are the same, but those would probably be my two. If I was
I don't know
like
enough about baseball to like really know if this is true or not, but I've heard them compared to the Mariners a lot as well.
Yeah,
maybe that's just like
the thing with the Mariners,
but
the Mariners have never even been to the World Series, which is crazy.
That is wild. Yeah.
But maybe the Bills too.
The Bills a little bit.
When you combine like heartbreak and then passion in the area for them.
Yeah. Although probably the
like,
Sabres are closer to the Bills, I guess, just based on being in Buffalo.
But I think because the Canucks are the only team to have lost Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals twice without winning a cup. And that to me feels like losing a bunch of back-to-back Super Bowls.
The Falcons too. They made 2 Super Bowls and both of them were like the worst heartbreaks imaginable.
And one of them was against a Boston area sports team.
There you go. So let's segue into some of the specific big events in Canucks recent history. We don't need to get to pre-90s stuff. I know very little about the pre-90s Canucks, honestly. I feel like
there's not a ton
you
need to know
there.
Yeah,
jerseys. There's some guy like Stan Smeel got his number retired.
The towel power because of Roger
Tony
Nielsen.
Tandy is an ex-Penguin. I remember.
Oh, okay. Yeah. There you go. Yeah.
Well, I guess the towel power thing is pretty funny, right? Because that was in the 82 run, right?
Yeah, it was against Chicago. Roger Nielsen was the coach of the Canucks at the time and felt that they were getting kind of jobbed by the refs, and so he put a towel on a hockey stick and lifted it up in like mock surrender. And then the next Canucks home game, all the fans brought towels from home to wave, and now that's like the Canucks like big thing is. So there's a statue,
specifically a white towel as well to like surrender.
To surrender.
So like our whole thing and like our big Canucks identity is where like the guys waving the white flag and getting fucked by the refs and surrendering.
Like we have a statue.
20,000 fans surrendering in unison.
That's what it is. Like if you look at it, if you step back and look at it in a vacuum, that's what it is. And yeah, like Aaron was saying, there's a statue out front of Rogers Arena of Roger Nielsen holding up the white towel on the stick. And it is a really cool moment, and it did kind of inspire the team to go on that run. But at the same time, we have a statue outside our arena of a coach surrendering to the refs. And it's also like a middle finger to the refs as well. And so it just seems like such bad like karma.
Yeah. So you mentioned you were both very young when the Canucks went on their 1994 run. The early 90s Canucks got suddenly very good. And in 1994, they make the Stanley Cup Finals. They make it to Game 7, which they lose in Madison Square Garden to the Rangers. But Game 7, Stanley Cup Finals, 1994, the farthest the franchise has ever gotten. What do you guys remember about that year, even if you were very little? I
feel like I remember looking at like some like newspaper headlines about it or something, but I was like 5, so I don't really remember anything.
Some black and white newsreel footage.
Yeah.
It wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, I remember like becoming a fan in like 99, 2000 is like when I really started getting into it, and like just hearing about the 94 Canucks all the time, and everyone who's old enough obviously was talking about them all the time. I knew Trevor Linden was a big deal, Pavel Bure obviously, and like that team is still like beloved. I think even more so than like the 2011 team. I think that's probably the most beloved team in franchise history. But yeah, and then the riot obviously happened afterwards. But Vancouver as a city loves to riot. They rioted in, I want to say 2000 because Guns N' Roses canceled a concert. So like, they'll kind of riot over anything. And the rioting thing is very funny too, as like online fans, because that's like kind of like the classic like go-to trash talk of Canucks fans is like, why don't you go burn your city down? And what Aaron and I have found is that if you sort of turn it around on them and say like, well, I guess we just care enough about our team to burn our own city down. I guess we just don't care enough about your team. And then they just like it disarms them. They just like don't know how to react to it. They're like, do you actually believe that? And it's like, I kind of do. I think I've tricked myself into believing that at this point. So
we are passionate about hockey and about Guns N' Roses keeping their contractual obligations to appear at events. Yeah. It's 2 things we care about.
Like, so 94, I saw so much of it, not like, cause I was 4 years old at the time, and I got my first Canucks jersey like a couple years later, and I signed up for the fan club where I got like an autographed Pavel Bure card in the mail. And I was really excited when they changed their logo to the Orca, which was something like as a little kid I could draw. But like being, 12 and getting on the forums, like that seemed like ancient history because it was half my life ago instead of just being like 8 years prior. Like that'd be like us talking about the 2017 Jim Benning Canucks, right? And so for a lot of those people that were older than us that lived it, I got to just like inherit this trauma and these opinions about like how good Cliff Ronning was and Dana Merzen. He really stood on his, not, well, he was a defenseman, so he doesn't stand on his head, but he was a beast for us in the playoffs. And and Lafayette hit the post, and fucking Mark Messier, that piece of shit. Because like as an 8-year-old, when the Canucks signed Mark Messier, you're like, oh, cool, I know him, he's good. So a lot of that was just like, I guess, secondhand experiencing it. Yeah. And like going back and watching the NHL networks airing old games. Like I remember I was really excited because before every game was on TV, there was like 7 or 8 games a year that were just on pay-per-view.
Oh my God.
And I conned my mother into buying like the pay-per-view package. And a part of it was like either before or after a game, they showed Game 7 in 1994 against Calgary. It went to overtime and Kirk McLean made this like amazing kick save. And then Pavel Bure wins on an overtime breakaway. And it's like this huge moment. And I like knew all of these beats from having read about them. Mm-hmm. And so I was so excited. I got to sit down and like actually watch the game before a like Tuesday night San Jose Sharks game at 7 p.m. on fucking pay-per-view. But yeah, I guess like everything from 94 was secondhand.
Well, making me feel old because I remember.
I'm sorry.
94. No, I remember that vividly. I remember specifically Sports Illustrated. I don't know if you've ever seen the cover. There was a "Why the NHL's Hot and the NBA's Not" cover.
Yeah, I have seen that cover.
And it was a split. It was like two overhead photos, and one of them was from the Canucks Rangers Cup final. Pavel Bure getting stopped on a penalty shot by Mike Richter of the Rangers. And it's a Sports Illustrated cover. And I was like, a big hockey fan. So I was like, hey, hockey's being noticed. And they're taking a shot at the NBA for some reason.
I don't know. We're both old enough now where like I have things that like hit me when people say they don't remember them. Like I'll work with people that weren't alive when Kiss Kiss by Chris Brown featuring T-Pain came out. And I feel like that's still the song of the summer,
I was 65 when that song came out. No, I think for people my generation too, I think the Canucks got semi-popular because of the Sega NHL games too.
Yeah,
like NHL '94, right around.
Because Bure was like so good in that game.
Yeah, although Bure was like so fast, you almost couldn't control him.
Yeah,
in that game, he was like 100 speed and was like so fast, you like couldn't do stuff with him. But and then the jerseys were cool too. So
the jerseys were great. I mean, I think they probably will go back to them full time at some point. It seems like they're kind of headed that way, but we'll see.
I also like the white, blue, and green too a lot.
I think they've always had like the Flying V is like a notorious jersey. That's probably their worst jersey.
I think they should bring that back as a third jersey. I think that kind of hot now on HD cameras.
Everything is cool just because it's old now.
Yeah,
one of my goalies is from Vancouver that I played with in a beer league, and it's just had the V jersey like all the time. Nothing is ugly once it's like past 20 years. It's immediately grandfathered into being cool.
Even the old like late 90s, early 2000s like Orca jerseys are kind of back now too. And people didn't like those a lot at the time, and now it's 25, 30 years old. So
whenever I wear the like navy blue to like maroon gradient Orca jersey, which people panned for a long time, they hated it. Whenever I wear it to a game now, I have like strangers compliment me on it. Even like Calgary Flames fans will come up and be like, oh, that's a sick jersey, man. Like, oh, thank you.
Yeah, every maligned jersey from the 90s, 2000s, the Islanders fisherman
the
jersey,
fisherman,
everyone ripped on. If you go to an Islanders game now, you're gonna see a bunch of those, for sure, probably ordered in the last like 5 years too. So they lose the 1994 Cup Finals in 7 games to the Rangers breaking their Cup drought, which went back to 1940. I remember being pissed off about that, but I couldn't complain too much. But there's still this awesome team with Pavel Bure, Alexander McGillney, Trevor Linden, but they kind of, they never got back to the finals until 2011. So what do you remember about that in-between period? I guess that's when your fandom was.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Buckle up. Well, the Canucks went and hired Mike Keenan to coach the Canucks. And then they also brought in Mark Messier, which must have really sucked to be like cognizant of that at the time. Like, here are these two fuckers that beat you, and now we're going to hire them. And oh, wait, we're going to strip the captaincy from Trevor Linden, the captain that took you to Game 7 and one goal away from a Stanley Cup, and give it to Mark Messier because he's Mark Messier. He's going to have a leadership award one day in the NHL.
And we're going to trade Trevor Linden, which in the end worked out for the team. But at the time, people were not happy.
Yeah, they thought that they were going to be really good with Messier. And McGillney came in afterwards as well, right?
Yeah.
He wasn't there for 94. And the team was really bad. And it was apparently a really bad locker room, which tends to happen in Vancouver. And they were atrocious. And so they were out of the playoffs from 96 was their last year in the playoffs, I want to say.
I think that's right. And then they didn't make the playoffs again until I think 2001 against the Avs, where they got swept. They just got destroyed. 2002.
Later.
Yeah, that was the first year I felt a little bit of hope as a Canucks fan, where they were the 8th seed against Detroit and got up 2-0. They beat Detroit 2 games on the road. Detroit, the number 1 seed. Detroit, I think if you look back at that roster, literally the majority of the roster or close to it is in the Hockey Hall of Fame. I'm
gonna look it up because you have Yzerman, you have Brendan Shanahan, you have Sergei Fedorov, you have Nick Lidstrom, you have Dominic Hasek, Brett Hull, Luke Robitaille, Igor Larionov.
God, that's insane.
Pavel Datsyuk was still on that team.
That was
somehow,
his first year,
but he was
I
only
think.
35 points.
Insane team. They got up 2-0. And then Dan Cloutier in Game 3 lets in a goal from center ice to Nick Lidstrom. And that was the first time I had hope as a Canucks fan, and then had our hopes dashed. But it was still a very exciting year. No one expected them to get that close against Detroit. And then 2003 is when the West Coast Express really started to take off. We mentioned them earlier, but that was my first memory of them winning a series as a kid.
Oh, that was so huge. That was catharsis.
Awesome. It was incredible. And then they go into the next round against Minnesota, a team that had existed for 3 years at that point, and Vancouver was so favored. They get up 3-1 in the series. Then Todd Bertuzzi says, I forget what the exact quote was, but essentially Minnesota fans shouldn't even bother buying tickets for the next game or whatever because we're just going to win right now. And then Vancouver loses in 7. And by the way, they were up 2-0 in Game 7, and they still lost.
When they were up 2-0 in that game in the intermission, I vividly remember walking outside, and I lived in the middle of nowhere, so it wasn't even nobody was hearing this. And I jumped into my mom's SUV and just started laying on the horn because I was so excited and needed to get it. I'm like, oh my God, they're going to go. And then they
lost in they lost because of Dan Cloutier. He let in some horrendous goals to Darby Hendrickson of all players.
Motherfucker.
Things kind of went downhill because the following year was the year Todd Bertuzzi broke Steve Moore's neck and kind of ended that whole West Coast Express era. And then of course, I will say this: 2011 essentially ruined being a hockey fan for me. It's just never been the same. I think up until that point, I was capable of having hope and believing that things could get better as a Canucks fan. And after that happened, it was I think what it is just seeing how hard it is to get to the finals and losing feels so bad. Because I'll hear from fans of teams that Columbus fans or whatever, fans that have never even been to the finals, and they're well, at least you've been to the finals. And I will tell you, when your team has never won and you lose in the finals, there's no worse feeling in the world.
Yeah.
The nice feeling is when you get to, I think it's about the conference finals where you're this might actually happen, and you can no longer parcel it away as, well, we took a big step this year and we'll come back the next one. And this is a young team and we're still we did our best and this is something to build off of. Because once you get to the conference finals, it's there's only 3 teams left. We can win the cup. We can do this. And how the Canucks went through that playoffs year, they beat Nashville in 6 games. That was also kind of disappointing because they were up. They could have won in Game 5, which I was at, drove from Calgary. And they lost it. And they had to go all the way back to Nashville, which kind of hurt because it's more wear and tear. But then they beat the San Jose Sharks that had Joe Thornton and were
Patrick
always
Marleau.
a thorn.
That was the Sharks near the peak of their powers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and beat them in 5. Canucks legend Kevin Bieksa scores the overtime goal to like go to the Cup finals. And then in the finals, the Canucks go up 2-0. That's oh God.
It's so tough to relive. I mean, I have still never seen the third period of Game 7. I have not seen footage of Boston raising the cup. I've seen pictures of it. I haven't seen any footage of it. Like I went to bed after the second period and just like slept for like 13 hours.
It's so like I remember Game 1, very close game. The Canucks win. I'm like, all right, good foot. Like we haven't given up home ice advantage. And then I bought tickets for Game 2 and drove to Vancouver again from Calgary and went. Yeah. And that was the game where Alex Burrows scored in overtime again.
Like 10 seconds into overtime.
I was partying on the streets. Like it was jubilation for just being up 2-0. Like going down Granville Street, high-fiving people. I remember there was like a guy with like bongos and then a guy with like a mic and they were playing beats and rapping about Ryan Kesler on the streets. Like it was so fun. And I get back to Calgary and everyone I talk to is saying, you must be so excited. Like your team's going to win the cup, right? Like it's only 2 more games. And I said this after they beat Chicago as well. Like I've been a Canucks fan long enough to know that they're just setting me up for disappointment in like the worst way possible. So while like logically, I think there's no way they can lose 4 out of 5 games, not this team. I like know that there's like a likelihood of that happening because like it's the Vancouver Canucks. And unfortunately I was right.
Yeah.
After a lifetime of, this suffering fandom, they go up 2-0. And I was just picturing you like telling the bongos guy, like, no, not yet. Like save the rap, please. Like, I know how this ends. But sorry, just to set the stage for people. So this is in 2011, the Canucks finally get back to the Stanley Cup Finals. They're playing the Boston Bruins, and the Canucks win games 1 and 2, 1-0, and then 3-2 in overtime. Then they go back to Boston. They lose 8-1 and 4-0.
Yeah.
And so when the series is 2-2, is this where you start to think like, okay, now they're blowing it for real?
By the time Game 4 hit, we were already deep in like conspiratorial the league is fucking us.
Yeah. Well, Cole Campbell's son played for the Bruins. The Bruins are an original 6 team. Jeremy Jacobs is like the head of like the board of governors. Tim Thomas had illegal pads, et cetera. Like the thing that always gets me is like Tampa had like I think the best or second best power play in the league, and Game 7 against Boston in the conference finals, not a single penalty was called. Like that, come on, that just doesn't happen.
It does in the playoffs. Like they put the whistles away.
But like zero penalties was so crazy. And like also I think Nathan Horton sprayed a fan with his water bottle and didn't get suspended for it.
Now the league's rigged for Florida, right?
Because Colin Campbell is in the head office or not Colin Campbell, his son.
I will say,
head office for Florida.
Very funny seeing Edmonton fans bring up the Colin Campbell stuff now after dismissing it in 2011. So
yeah,
I
they're
do
circling their
that.
cork boards and like connecting the threads.
Yeah, I didn't even realize how like at the ready you were with these like explanations.
Oh yeah. Well, I think
just citing
like
facts
with that series. And I think this happens in like almost every cup final, and it definitely happened to Edmonton this year. Both teams are going to be really good at that point, and usually the healthier team wins.
Yeah.
And the Canucks were ravaged by injuries that year.
Kesler was so hurt. Ham Hughes was out. Manny Malhotra had come back, had like one eye basically at that point because he almost lost an eye earlier in the year. Aaron Rome gets suspended for 4 games.
4-game suspension.
Because the hit was like half a second late. Oh.
But he knocked Nathan Horton out of the series, right?
He did, but then they rallied around it. So I think that kind of backfired
I think
on the Canucks a little bit.
Yeah, but I think that one, Aaron Rome is like a depth defenseman and Nathan Horton is
but that's sort of
how best players.
For sure.
And he knocked him out for the whole series. So I don't know if we can count that in the injuries.
No.
It's the 4-game suspension because like when's the last time you've seen a 4-game suspension or the only other time in the Stanley Cup Finals? Like
it also speaks to how bad our depth was at that point that losing Aaron Rome legitimately like completely screwed us over
because everyone else was hurt, right?
We had so many injuries at that point. But anyway, it was basically that was like the high point of my fandom, and since then it's just been like it's so bleak and so depressing just looking back.
So a 2-2 series. The Canucks, they go back home. They win 1-0, go up 3-2, go back to Boston. They lose 5-2. And then game 7, kind of the Riot game, they lose 4-0. They really are never in it. They give up a goal kind of late in the first, and then
it was over after the first goal. Like, the team was just so beat up and exhausted and finished at that point. And
it's weird that you say that, Stefan, because like I don't remember the last 2 periods. I think I might have watched them. I vividly, like it was yesterday, remember my walk home from work and like figuring out how to listen to live radio on my phone so I could listen to Canucks sports talk radio on my like little walk because I was so psyched for this game.
Yeah.
And I got home and I locked it, and they looked kind of flat, letting that goal out in the first period, which was against Marchand, I believe. Right?
I think it was I think Bergeron maybe had the first one.
Yeah.
But
nevertheless, then I straight up don't remember. I remember watching the riots online afterwards.
Yeah, I remember watching the riots.
Attention to
that was awesome.
I remember laying on my floor a bit.
Yep.
But
I was like, I was just laying face down in the dark,
sent into a fugue state.
Oh,
it's like a
I was laying on the back of like my living room floor, staring up at this fucking ceiling at one point.
It was so brutal.
Where did you watch Game 7, Stefan?
I watched at my parents' house with my dad. I had watched a bunch of games with friends and stuff before, and went out to bars and stuff. And then I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go home and just watch this with my dad. And it was like we just like literally, I think after the second period, didn't say a word. He turned off the game, and I just went to bed. And and that was it. Like, we did not say a word to each other. It was so depressing. Yeah.
Watching the finals this year, and I guess this is something like you've experienced, but like to see Florida up by like that much and just kind of doing a victory lap, or like when Vegas beat Florida a couple of years ago,
like 9-3 or
the
whatever it was. Yeah.
To like be a fan of a team that knows you're going to win the Stanley Cup, that like it's going to happen. Like I can't even imagine what that would feel like.
Yeah.
It's got to be such a high.
It's pretty good, but this podcast isn't about me.
Your
misery. We're talking about your misery.
It's like inconceivable. Like it would easily be a top 3, top 2, top 1 moment of my life. Like I don't have kids yet. Like I'm engaged, but like I'm not married yet. I'm sure that'll be pretty cool. Will it be Canucks fucking winning a Stanley Cup? Cool. I don't know.
You can get married at any time.
Yeah, no. I see my partner every day. She's amazing. But do I see the Canucks lift the Stanley Cup every day? No, I don't see that at all in my life ever.
I got married in 2016, the same week the Penguins beat the Sharks.
Oh my god!
Oh my god! This guy.
I'm gonna cut all this out. I feel so bad. I feel like I'm like doing something to you. Like I've caused the Canucks. Like
no.
Like no. I don't know.
This is kind of cathartic, honestly.
Yeah. So the Canucks lose Game 7 pretty uncompetitively. 4-0's the final, and then tens of thousands of people are on the streets in downtown Vancouver. And whether or not people know this or not, there's a 30 for 30 about it. It turns into the 2011 Vancouver Stanley Cup riot, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
There's 150 injuries, 100 arrests, a bunch of cars on fire, a bunch of property damage, $4 million in property damage, $5 million spent on prosecuting people who rioted and then taped themselves setting cars on fire and shit. Where were you guys during the riot, and what were you thinking during and afterwards?
At home in Calgary.
Yeah, I was at my parents' house still. But it was like, I knew there was going to be a riot, win or lose. I think, in fact, if they had won, the riots would have been even crazier. But literally, there were fans, or not even fans. There were fans who rioted, obviously, but there were people who just came in to Vancouver. Like, people came into Vancouver from like Vancouver Island specifically to riot. Like, I know that for a fact. Like, there are just people who were like, this is an excuse to loot and riot. And then obviously, like, the mob mentality kicks in, and like people who probably wouldn't have otherwise rioted see it happening and get into it. And that's partially one of the reasons why I didn't want to go watch it like downtown, because I knew whatever happened, there was going to be a riot. Like, there was no doubt in my mind there was going to be a riot. You could just tell from the energy.
This reminds me, like, this is going back to an earlier question, but it ties into this. I think the Canucks might be like the pre-championship winning Cubs.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Like, because I happened to be in Chicago when they won Game 7. I was
Hmm.
like watching rugby down there like a few days later, and I flew in that day just by chance. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna go down to Wrigley Stadium, and got to be like outside of it when it popped off and
Yeah.
saw them freak out. And I was like in the mob as people were like climbing telephone poles and jumping on cop cars. But that was like a happy version of it. And like
Yeah.
we heard some fireworks go off, and it was like impossible to get a cab, but like it wasn't violent. And I wonder if that's what would have happened in Vancouver, where there would
Yeah,
have been like a lot of
probably.
property damage, but like not as much rage.
I think so.
Just
Yeah.
local media interviewing you, just like, I've been a Cubs fan for so long. I just loved like my lovable losers finally. Like I'm dreaming of this day. I came in for some rugby in a couple of days.
Well, there's like a Taco Bell across the street that like people are on the roof of somehow. Like it was crazy.
Yeah. So I mean, like you said, Stefan, too, that it became why don't you guys just riot? Maybe riot. Like the I watched the 30 for 30 in preparation for this
Yeah.
podcast, and man, some of the I mean, yeah, it's crazy that the riot and the damage and people getting stabbed and shit is nuts, but the haughty reactions to it from like commentators and stuff, and like
Yeah.
I have never in my life seen such it's like so
Yeah.
oh man,
It
I
happens
don't
in
know. It's like I'm
any
just
like
like
European soccer team
yeah,
fan like traveling to another city and just like starting a huge brawl. Like that
I
just it just happens in other sports, you
I don't
know?
know if I'm desensitized to it or something, but like because it like you see the footage and it's bad, but then everyone being like, "I weep for my nation," I'm just
Yeah.
like, it's
It's
sports and they lost a game and they're pissed off and they're doing some shit. Like
It's
yeah.
a
no one,
And
little
then
bit of
no one
property
died.
damage. Who
yeah. Also, the next
cares?
morning, like thousands of people came downtown to
Yeah.
like clean up and everything too. So like
Hmm.
it was, like I said, there was always going to be a riot. And in fact, the last playoff run that they were a part of, they specifically were like, we're not going to do any outdoor
Hmm.
like watch parties. And you watch any other Canadian team in the playoffs, they all have outdoor watch parties. And
Yeah. The Oilers ones are
Vancouver,
crazy. Yeah.
Oh,
I think Vancouver got
Ken
one at like a
Sim.
yeah. Well, our mayor has specifically said, I think he literally said he hopes the Canucks don't get to the finals.
Yeah, no, he's like the Canucks fan in me would love if they went far in the playoffs, but as mayor, I kind of hope they don't because of
Yeah.
the like.
Man, if
he's
you're a real
psycho.
fan and you want your team to win the cup less than like a car getting overturned, like
Yeah.
I don't know, you're not I don't
Yeah.
think that's a real
He's
fan
not
to
like
me.
a real.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we don't have. I think they had like a sort of big screen set up at like a park for a couple games against Edmonton, but like they're not shutting down the streets downtown or anything. Like I think if they got to the finals again, they might do it and just have like tons of security, and you have to have like tickets to go to like events on the street and stuff. But I think they're so
Ev-
tentative to set that up again.
Everyone is strapped into one of those Hannibal Lecter gurneys
Yeah.
with like their mouth like why's my mouth covered? They're like, dude, we're not taking any chances. Just a bunch of individual ones lined up and then they wheel you
Yeah.
home safely. Yeah.
I don't know about you guys, but like for high stakes sports games, I don't want to be with other people.
No.
Like
No.
it because I
I'm
turn
too
into
stressed
like
out.
a bad person and I'm
Yeah.
super stressed out. Like last year, when the Canucks were playing Edmonton in the second round of the playoffs, it was game 6, and there was like my fiance, we had like a family function, and her like grandparents were there, and they were like casual hockey fans. They're just
Mhm.
like, oh, go Canada. I hope either team wins. I'm secretly rooting for the Oilers because they're from Alberta. And I was so mad, just
Yes.
like a complete prick the entire time. And when they lost, I just sat there like sulking, looking at my phone. I'm like, this isn't me. I should have stayed home. Like, it's way more rude to go and have a bad time than like stay home and just like save them from that. Yeah, like I watched Game 7 alone in
Yeah.
2011, and I would do it again. Like to go out to a watch party like
Mhm.
that, if they lose, I'd just be like
I
in
can't
a
do
terrible, even if the stakes are like, oh, if they win, I'll be absolute jubilation.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I only want to be with people that are comparable fans.
Exactly.
If it's like
Yeah.
my brother, my dad, couple close friends, like that's something. But I've done before, like for Super Bowls, like watch parties, and it's like I remember one specifically when the Steelers they lost to the Packers, And it was like this peripheral friend brought her boyfriend, and he sat in like the dead center of the couch in like the best seat. And I was just like seething. I was just like, what the fuck are you? You're not rooting for either team. I barely know your girlfriend. I was like so mad because everything is like times 1,000. And he's just, could I get one of those beers? I'm like, fuck you, fucking beer. Yeah, I'll get one of those beers. It's like, yeah. I'm being rational. You're the irrational one here is you. Yeah. Clearly. Like, yeah. So after, a lifetime of following this team, how do you think your fandom has changed? And I know you've maybe kind of answered this in jest or seriously. Do you think the Canucks will ever win a cup in your lifetime?
No. I don't.
Yeah, I was putting money on it. No.
Like genuinely, seriously, no.
Genuinely, I don't think they will. Wow. I suppose at the very least, not until we haven't even touched on this. Not until Aquilini sells the team, because not only do the Canucks have like a lot of like roster issues and like management issues and potentially coaching issues, they have maybe the worst or second worst owner in the entire NHL. And I posted this recently, but if you're a fan of a team and they have a bad coach or a bad GM, it's fine because eventually they're going to get fired. Mm-hmm. If you are a fan of a bad team and they have a bad roster, it's fine because you're going to be bad and draft good young players. Like that's just how it works. If you have a bad owner, there's nothing you can do because they're a billionaire. So because they're a billionaire, they are a stubborn asshole. So they are probably not going to give up control of the team outside of them like dying. And it's just like you feel so helpless knowing that you have an owner who like interferes with management, who's like basically as stupid as the stupidest Canucks fan, but he's like in charge of the team. And so like, I think there's no chance they will win a cup with Aquilini in charge. I think if they got sold to someone who was kind of like hands off, that would maybe change things a little bit. But I do, in my heart, I truly believe I could live another 50 years, 60 years and not see them win a cup because I think it's just knowing how hard it is to get to the finals is one thing. Mm-hmm. And the NHL keeps expanding. I mean, they want to get up to like 34, 36 teams. Mm-hmm. So that's going to water down the talent pool, make it even harder to win. I mean, I know I'm looking at it like in the current situation, there's no chance now. But I just know what it's like being a Canucks fan. Like they're not going to win a draft lottery. They're not going to get lucky. They're just not going to ever win a Stanley Cup. Like I truly believe that.
So yeah, like the Aquilini group bought the Canucks fully in 2006. Like right when Luongo came into town. And at first they were hands off. They hired Mike Gillis, who was like a former player agent. And he was seen as like the like progressive general manager at the time. Like he was hiring sleep doctors. And there's a story about how the Canucks had movement monitoring bracelets to like track their sleep cycles and stuff. And when they wanted to go out and party, they would give all their bracelets to one rookie to go to bed and sleep with. And so like they could go out to the bar and stuff afterwards. Like they were really
our entire team is sleeping together in one bed.
Yeah. One giant bed. Like it's
no, that's a team. These guys close.
Yeah. And like he did all sorts of cap circumvention, which by the way, Canucks only team to get penalized for cap circumvention with the Luongo contract.
Detroit and Chicago did that a ton.
Oh yeah. And I mean, that kind of contributes to, that's a good example of Canucks fans feeling targeted and like hard done by. And like, I think there is this like psychotic sector of the fan base that's like almost like QAnon level conspiracy theories. But you sort of get it because they've just been losing for so long and you want to look for an explanation.
But yeah, like to finish that, like they let Gillis run it and he got them to within a game of the Stanley Cup. And then the year after in 2012, the Canucks were the best team in the league again, at least by points, I believe, and get annihilated by the LA Kings team that went on to win the cup, who were an 8 seed. The year after that, they, again, pretty good team, and they get swept by the San Jose Sharks.
They hired John Tortorella for one season.
I remember that.
Which was... he tried getting into a fight with Bob Hartley, the Flames coach at the time. That didn't work out.
Dan, I don't know if you know this. John Tortorella did not live in Canada while he was the coach of the Canucks.
Oh, yeah. He commuted from like northern Washington, right?
From Point Roberts, which is this little enclave, basically, right below the BC border. And yeah, he lived there for like tax purposes or whatever, and would drive up to Vancouver from the US like every day, and had a Murphy bed in his office so he could sleep.
Yeah, he'd like oftentimes skip practice and stuff.
Yeah.
But they shit can Gillis after
Yeah.
that Tortorella team like completely implodes. And this is a quote from May 23rd, 2014. And the Canucks didn't make a real playoffs for 9 years. There was like the weird COVID bubble in there as well.
Which
but,
we
like,
don't
that's
count.
an asterisk, doesn't
the
really count.
Coyotes are in there. It's like,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I like this team. I like the core players. This is a team we can turn around in a hurry. It is.
That was Jim Benning, I believe. Was
Yeah,
that
that
from
was from Jim Benning.
his opening press conference as
I believe
as
so,
GM?
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure he told the owner exactly that so he could get the job. Because
Well, that's it.
100%
He
it.
was
Yeah.
around for what, 7-8 years?
End of 2021, he got fired, and that's when I started watching the Canucks again because I had stopped watching them altogether for 2 years. I had said I'm not going to watch this team until Jim Benning gets fired.
So are the two of you, would you say you are as big of a fan as you were growing up now?
I think so. It's just like different fandom. I think when you're a kid, right? You sort of think like, and we see a lot of fans like this who are like adults now. But like when you're a kid, you kind of think every move your team makes is good, and every signing is good, and every trade is good. I think as you get older and more jaded, you become a bit more realistic. So I think I follow them just as much, if not more, because it's easier to follow them now with social media and everything. But I think I watch them through, I mean, as you've heard on this episode, a very different lens where I'm just kind of resigned to watch them. I guess I like them just as much as I did as when I was a kid, but I watch them a little differently now.
Yeah, like I watched
seething,
80
gritted
of the
teeth.
82 games last year.
Mhm.
I'm like wearing a Canucks hat right now. I'm still a fan, but it's almost like an intellectual exercise to watch them and be like, how can they continue to mess this up, right? Like, yes, I'm emotionally invested, and like when they're good, like I said before, edge of my seat. I like am a curmudgeon when they lose, etc. But there's just no hope, no jobs, no cash.
Yeah.
We used to have Bure, McGillney, Linden. now we have no jobs, no hopes, no cash, no draft picks.
Yeah.
Yeah, no draft
No cap
picks.
space,
No cups.
no
Yeah.
players under 28. Yeah.
But the worse they are, the better it is for our content. So it's, yeah.
That is really funny is like whenever they do something completely boneheaded, I see an immediate spike in downloads and even like Patreon subscriptions and stuff. And it's like, it's very weird because the fan of me wants them to do well and I can like talk about the cool, good things that they did.
Yeah.
But I guess for content, it's good that
people want to hear us
them.
like sighing like 50 times an episode loudly
Yeah.
to the mic. So
Well,
like
good
when
for comedy. You're just like, oh god, miserable.
when the Canucks won the
worst
Pacific
expression.
last year, we had so many people ask us like, well, if they win the cup, what are you going to change the name of the podcast to? Which, I mean, come on.
I don't think we have to worry about that.
We don't have to worry about that for a long, long time. And we probably cursed ourselves by even entertaining that question. So.
Your Stanley Cup podcast has 0 downloads.
Yeah.
and you're finally free, like at the end of Goodwill
I think we
Hunting.
just stopped
You're like,
podcasting. I think
yes.
that'd be it.
And you,
Yeah.
like,
That'd be the
you
last
smile and walk
episode.
away from the mics, and you're like,
Yeah.
you finally don't have to do this anymore.
That's on. Like the last thing I'll say is I think if they won the cup, part of me would be like, I can stop watching them now. Like this is the end. I've gotten to the end of my fandom. It's fine.
Yeah.
I won. Like it's over.
Genie, you're free.
Exactly. Oh boy.
That's our show for the week. Thanks again to Stefan and Aaron for coming on to make a compelling case for why we should all hate the Vancouver Canucks. If you liked our show, feel free to leave an iTunes review or just tell people about it. We'll be back next Tuesday with an all-new episode. Thanks for listening.